Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for links in the chain. Now, when it comes to the world of crypto, people love to speculate. But sometimes you need to bite into the meat of the situation and take a look at the real numbers. Fortunately, we here at BLOCKTV love meat and are happy to find those facts. So of course we have with us today Christopher Bendixson, Head of Research at Coinshares, to report on key findings from their blockbuster H1 2019 report on crypto and see how the developments have rolled out. First of all, Christopher, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on again.
Okay, so before we boil down into some of the more sort of nuanced details of the report, can you just give us some of those key facts that seem to stand out in H1 of 2019 from your report?
Yeah, so we observed a few things happening over the course of this first half, some of which were surprising, some of which were kind of anticipated. I feel like a lot of this half was about recovery. We started off in a pretty terrible position. We had just come off the November, where the bottom fell out of the market and people were panicking. It was sort of a depressed time at the beginning of the year. People were speculating, is this going to be a long-term year? A long-term bear market year? Is what's going on? Is mining going to collapse? So the first thing we started to see was that we saw recovery in a certain set of assets. Litecoin led the charge there. Immediately after, Bitcoin came, rose very rapidly, sort of pared back its losses for most of 2018. We haven't reached new peaks yet, but we're getting there. The mining market recovered. Other altcoins came along after. We had good recoveries in many of them, but no alt season like we're sort of accustomed to as these bear markets recover. So among the report currencies that we follow, Litecoin smashed it, had a 288% recovery. Bitcoin close after, 180%-ish. Ethereum a little weaker, around 100, and then XRP didn't do too well in the first half, 6% increase, which in the crypto market isn't very much.
I do want to talk in a moment about how the first half has already seen some interesting reflections that we've seen in the first few months of the second half of 2019. But before we do get to that, there was an important point that seemed to come out in your report, or as a consequence of your report, which is the distinctions between this bull run that we saw at the first half of this year versus the 2017 bull run. What can you say, talk about a little bit about some of those differences and what do you think that means?
Yeah, so in the previous, in the bull run of 2017, we had a couple of, we had a few metrics that were present that are not present in this, mini bull run, if you will. So one of the things that didn't really happen during Q2 this year until the very, very end is widespread media attention. So in 2017, Bitcoin and crypto in general and the ICO boom in particular was on everybody's lips. Everybody was talking about it. It was all over the news. It was all over social media. Google Trends spiked. There was an altcoin rally at the same time. So this has sort of been absent from this year. We've seen some altcoins do pretty well. Litecoin did really well in the early year. Other than that, there have been some smaller coins that have done well, but in general, the altcoin market has done pretty poorly compared to Bitcoin. This is also important in crypto because opportunity cost in crypto is measured in Bitcoin. So if you're doing poorly against the sort of benchmark, then it doesn't really matter how well you're doing compared to the US dollar, for example. So when we're seeing these types of rallies in the absence of the aforementioned things, it would probably point to retail demand pushing prices up if you have all of those things present. When they're not present, the immediate thoughts kind of go towards institutional incoming pressure.
Right, and speaking of that institutional pressure, I want to read a short quote from the report itself and get your comment on it. So you say, what is beyond doubt, however, is that Libra's launch marks a watershed moment in the history of cryptocurrencies. Talk a little bit about what you see as the Libra effect in H1 2019.
Yeah, so this was something that came at the very tail end of Q2 and happened somewhat into Q1. So we weren't able to go very deeply into it in the report. But when Libra came out, the one thing that is pretty certain about it is that when you look at the partners that are involved in the Libra project, and you also look at the fact that they call this a cryptocurrency, whether one agrees with that definition or not, what it's done is that it's immediately turned turned cryptocurrency into a much more sort of house safe type of term. So we've had years of, some would say, not great media coverage about crypto in general, where you've had a lot of misinformed information hit the public about how this is used for money laundering and terrorist financing and all the usual suspects when you want to disparage something. And as soon as this comes out and people realize that, no, actually, hold on a minute, Facebook is doing this, their partners read like a who's who of Silicon Valley tech companies. It involves payments giants like Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. Maybe this isn't just for criminals. Maybe there's something happening here. So in my opinion, when Libra came out, it's undone years of negative press about crypto in general. And this is something that I can anecdotally sense too in conversations that I'm having with people, is that all of a sudden crypto is not something that people are irrationally afraid of. It's something that they come towards with more of an open mind and more of a curious sense of discovery.
Certainly a curious sense of discovery, but I do wonder, obviously now we're about halfway through Q3 already, and we're seeing some very interesting action here in the crypto markets, particularly in response to what's considered, at least in the short term, some pretty widespread fear in the equity markets and the mainstream markets. Do you think that interest has yet turned into the sort of store of value, risk-off investment that so many inside the crypto sphere are hoping for? Or do you think we're already seeing the markers of a turnaround, or is it simply too early to tell?
We can't tell quite yet, but there are certainly signs that are pointing towards this narrative taking hold in traditional markets. So, a couple months isn't really long enough to deem this to be something that is going to be present in markets going forward. But we have seen Bitcoin in particular, which is traditionally uncorrelated with all financial markets, gold, stocks, bonds, everything. We've seen that recently in the last few months, Bitcoin has become inversely correlated with equity markets and somewhat positively correlated with gold, which would imply that it is, at least to a certain extent, gaining some sense of being a safe haven, if you will, or something that is to be treated as a safe haven-esque type of investment. Now, on top of this, we have these geopolitical events happening in Argentina and Hong Kong, where people are sort of racing to get their money into more secure jurisdictions, or in Bitcoin's case, non-jurisdictions. And I feel like these are all signs that this is a narrative that is taking hold. I think we need to see sort of a full-blown market meltdown for us to confirm whether or not this is something that holds in large macro situations, but positive signs so far.
Positive signs, I suppose, unless you're in those markets that are melting down, you wouldn't want to be seeing that. But then I suppose looking forward, based on your understanding so far, based on what we saw in the first half of 2019, what we're seeing so far in Q3, if you were to give a sort of prediction for how the rest of the year would lay out, Christopher, what would you say?
In crypto markets in general, well, this is notoriously difficult. I mean, the the parabolic rise that we saw earlier this year, I feel like everybody agrees that it got a little bit ahead of itself. Parabolic movements can't be sustained that long unless there's huge underlying pressures on the buy side. I don't see that quite having materialized in crypto yet. I think we'll get there, but to get there, we need more of the same type of environment that we had in 2017. We need more media attention. I think we need to have more sort of retail FOMO, and then on top of that, we need institutions to take this to the next level. As each sort of bull run materializes and corrects, it needs a bigger and bigger influx of capital to sustain an equivalently sized, in percentage terms, bull run for the next run up. So if we're to see anything like the previous bull runs we've seen, we need a lot more capital inflows this time. So I think a lot of things are lining up to look positive for crypto. We have enormous amounts of negative yield in global markets. Equities are at historic high PE ratios. There aren't a lot of places to go hunt for yield these days. We've seen gold move very positively. I think everything is setting up for a positive price environment in crypto. We need to shake this correction properly first, and then after that, when we can find a solid bottom with some good support, I think it's likely that we'll see positive movement.
Positive movement perhaps for Bitcoin, but do you think that the altcoins will manage to have their season yet, or is Bitcoin ready to run away with the show?
Oh, right. Wouldn't that be the $1 million question? I think institutional money is less likely to take the plunge into altcoins. This also has to do with availability. Institutions can't necessarily just go and buy crypto on some unregulated exchange somewhere. They need institutional grade on-ramps, and this is not something that's widely available for altcoins at all. It's only just now becoming available for Bitcoin. So if institutions are to be a main driver of the next bull run, I find it hard to believe that altcoins are going to come after with the same sort of vigorousness that they did last time when it was certainly retail driven. If retail comes back with a vengeance and becomes the main driver of this next run up as well, then we could see an altcoin rally. I have my doubts. I think Bitcoin is going to probably continue to dominate going forward, but I've been wrong about this before, so.
As you say, in this predictions game, it's a very difficult thing to pin down, and when it comes to crypto, even harder. But you're trying your best, looking at the facts, seeing what the trends show us, and that's all we can ask from you. Christopher Bendixson, Head of Research at Coinshares, releasing another blockbuster report. Always look forward to seeing and reporting on these. I look forward to the next one. Christopher, thanks so much for joining us here at BLOCKTV, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.